Hello, and welcome to Martini's Econ Country Bites. Today, yet again, another community fighting and pushing back against the steamrolling of communities for these so-called green renewables, where there's been little to no consultation. And this lovely lady is coming to us all the way from Victoria. Her name is Kate Lancashire, and I'd like to welcome her to Martini's Econ Country Bites. Hello, how are you, Kate?
Very well, thank you, Martini. How are you?
Yeah, I'm well, thanks. I've in my background there on our screen, I've put back my little cow and country screen background for today's episode. I've had that wedding there, just in going out in support of farmers and making sure that the message is always heard in regional and city areas, that the plight of our farmers and landholders in the country are the ones that we need to be paying attention to, because what's happening there is going to happen in the city. Kate, would you like to introduce yourself to our lovely listeners today and let them know who you are and how you became involved in Access Denied and what's been going on with the movement in Victoria about trying to stop these green renewables? I don't know. We have Vikings out in the sea here. I don't know what yours are there. The invasion of these corporations onto our land and the destruction of food security and generational farming. Would you like to introduce yourself, and we can probably start from there about a lot of questions, what we can talk about.
Sure. So I'm part of the Across Victoria Alliance Steering Committee, which is an umbrella committee that covers quite a lot of other groups that have come up and become to life in Victoria because of this particular steamrolling. I became involved in this over 5 years ago down around the Ballarat area, where we have the Western Renewables Link. And farmers and landholders were actually being harassed to actually have people from AusNet come onto their land. And that's where this all originated from, was that we were saying to them, no, I'm sorry, you can't have access. We're not allowing you access. And that's where it's sort of grown, that it's access denied to our private land.
Absolutely. What kind of harassment and what kind of tactics were being used at the time? I mean, we're going back 5 years, but certainly now they're starting to get a lot more legal standing, or getting local and state governments involved to sort of take away the rights of farmers to protect their private land. How did that start, Kate?
Correct. So basically it commenced with, we had farmers and landholders down in this area who were locking their gates, and they had these people come onto their properties. There's been a number of instances where farmers were actually really pushed to their limits, and it's increased a lot of mental health issues around this area and right up through into the Wimmera and up to Kerrang, right across Victoria, because of these bullying tactics that they're using to access private land. And because this new legislation, or this update to the legislation, has been pushed through, it's making it more and more difficult for us to push back. And it's just draconian. It's really not taking into account or consulting with the people who have looked after these farms for generations, and who've produced the food to put onto the table of our city cousins.
And you know what? That's the thing that people, they've taken for granted, or they haven't comprehended now, that the connection to food and who grows it and how it's done, the processes in that. I am very grateful. I've been saying for a long time that once the fishermen and farmers come together, they are going to be a formidable force. And that is a rally that we had at the beginning of the year, where we had farmers join us against stopping offshore wind. And all I can say is that it was a pivotal moment where there was so much alignment of this bullying and steamrolling. And draconian is exactly what it is. I mean, my gosh, we saw that a couple of years back in Victoria. I mean, the draconian measures that people were being exposed to or under were absolutely violations of human rights. I just wanted to play this video quickly because I think this video.
Hi Andrew, how long have you been living and working on the farm here?
Our family's been here 125 years. I've been working here 42 years since I was 7.
Yeah. So 142 years.
Family's been here 125.
So we had a couple of days off to get all the weeding done, and then
And what do you reckon your forefathers would say about all of this?
Oh, they'd be turning in their grave, wouldn't they?
Wouldn't they?
Yeah. They wouldn't be very happy.
No.
That articulates to me the destruction of generational farming, and it's been so hard for farmers to keep it together generation after generation. 125 years being on that land, and to have them being pushed off, pushed around, bullied by not only proponents from local communities, but state and federal government. It not only makes me angry, but I have huge empathy, and it makes me fight for this ongoing, because you hear Andrew's story there, and it's talking about, our forefathers fought for having freedom of rights and human rights in this nation.
Right.
And they were the ones that left their farms to go and fight for this nation, for their freedom. Like my grandfather, I'm the granddaughter of an Anzac, so this really does hit home to me. And I do get very angry and emotional at times, which I'm a little bit now, because I am so sick of hearing this same story. Kate, would you like to share perhaps a few stories that you know of you've been involved in with this access denied now, this new kind of movement that's moved on past just lock the gates? This is something that is going to all landholders. It's not just farmers. This is what we need to get through to us city people. They're going to come for your land too.
Correct. This is the tip of the iceberg. And where does this stop? And I think the thing that is quite concerning about this is that they are using what they deem reasonable force. Who decides what's reasonable force to access your private land? And, a lot of the officers that they are going to use are probably police officers or who are part of small community towns. So it's really divisive. It's pitting neighbour against neighbour. And at the end of the day, there are alternatives to going overhead, except they just won't look at those. They won't even consider those, and they're railroading this project through.
And of course, this is all new grid lines that are going to support this so-called green renewables, which is the other side of the equation, where farmers are being pitted against each other to host wind turbines or not, or solar arrays or not. And this is why it's a cumulative and a cumulative effect of stresses and pressure. And I hear from so many, it's like, I don't know where to go from here. I'm already worn down. And I just tell farmers time and time again, I said, anytime you need to speak to someone, pick up the phone to someone like me and say, you know what, we've got your back and we'll help you fight this, because we cannot allow farmers to be pushed off their land, to have their land degraded, to have their land no longer useful for agriculture in the future, and we need to all stand unite together. Kate, where are things at right now and moving this forward?
So basically it's at what we call stage 1. So TCV are approaching landholders to access their property to do studies. There's a great cohort of landholders up around that area, Gree, who are all working together. They are all standing shoulder to shoulder at gates to stop this access. And as we're all aware, the next step, or stage 2, is that they will then take it to court and get court ruling that they can actually access the land. However, once that occurs, that will only encourage our farmers to stand closer and fight that little bit harder to stop this occurring, because as you said, once our farmland's gone, it's gone. We can't return it, and we lose our viable farm food producing land. Where do we get our food from then?
Yeah, import it from China, genetically modified from anywhere. We don't have control over what we put in our bodies. Yeah, that's all tied down also to the way they're trying to restrict other things in our lives. And again, as you said, draconian measures. It's unconscionable that they would use these kinds of acts against the people that they're supposed to serve. And this is the thing which is absolutely outrageous to me, that the government is turning against its own people. Perhaps you could describe and outline for people that are looking at this map just how vast this area is in the pink and what this signifies to these communities, Kate?
Absolutely. So this is, you can see that it's, from Stawell, Ararat, right up through to Kerrang. This is a really large area. If you were to drive this in a car, you're looking at a couple of hours travel between some of those towns. It's excellent cropping area. So it's where we get a lot of our grain from for simple things like our beers, people having barbecues in the city, that's where they get their beers from. It's where you get your everyday staples, your bread, all of those sorts of things. So if it goes, this map actually has been collated just to show and to illustrate the number of people who are opposed to the renewable energy projects across their land. And when you look at that, how diverse that is and how much colour there is on that map, that really should illustrate to people that there's a lot of farmers standing against this.
Wow. This is a map that it illustrates very clearly how much opposition there is, and this is the farmers locking their gates and giving no access to these proponents that, well, I wouldn't even call them proponents, like I just call them shysters. They're hoodwinking the communities, thinking that hosting these things in any way, shape or form would be good for them, either financially or long term. And this is the thing, it's like it's reading the fine print, isn't it, Kate? Because once you've done looking into the fine print, you really see that there's not really much of a win situation at all. If it is, it's so short term and it's very narrow-sighted to think that in the future that this is going to be anything good for the entire nation, our communities long term, because all it's going to do is cause degrading of the land. And as you said, once we lose this food security, once we lose these locations of generational farmers, that means farmers that are educated, farmers that know weather cycles, that weather cycle thing that they do. I have so many farming family and friend that said, this year reminds me of 40 years ago. We had a very similar weather pattern 40 years ago. And that's why generational farmers are so important, because their wisdom, their knowledge, they know the land like the back of their hand.
Absolutely.
They lose that.
And they care for that land. That's where their livelihood comes from. So they look after the land and they ensure that it's there to hand to the next generation. However, with these industrial landscapes coming through, it's going to destroy that land. So, you can't use it to the same extent that it's being used at the moment.
No, and certainly once land is contaminated, they will stop people from putting like grazing sheep, cattle, anything else that's sold for food production. They'll stop that once the contamination is found. And this is another reason, if people do their research, that once your land's contaminated, the government can take it off you or deem it to be no longer viable for agriculture, and they'll then reassign that land to something else, and they'll just put regeneration on it, and that'll be done once we put it back to some kind of regeneration. So at the moment we have them mowing down the Kosciuszko National Park and other national parks and forest areas for grid lines, but then when we get rid of our farmland, they'll try and put that back to nature as well. So we can see that it's a stitch up every way that we try and fight back, but we are, and we're doing it together, Kate. What other information do you think is vital for people to really comprehend just not only how vast the pushback is, but those factors that people might not be aware of in the city or other areas, especially Victoria?
I think one of the things that's really lacking now is the education piece. So in our school systems, and it's systemic right through school systems, there is not the education about where our food comes from. How many children just go to the supermarket? That's where their milk is. That's where their bread is. So therefore, they're lacking that piece of knowledge that
Connection.
actually then supports farming and supports agriculture, because as far as they're aware, it's all in a supermarket. So what do we need farmers for?
Magically appears in a plastic wrap.
Correct. But that also speaks to, your ecosystems and your native environments, because they're not getting out of the cities. They're being indoctrinated, if you like, with social media and things that they're seeing on television. Is that the honest truth that's being told? Are they showing the destruction that's occurring in our national parks where they're putting these lines through? Are they showing the destruction that's going to be caused in, farmland? They're not. So basically, they are controlling the narrative at the moment. And the other concern.
Are you still finding that the mainstream media are very much that way? Because in Western Australia, like literally to get any kind of truthful perspective and facts, because we try and base everything that we push back on facts, science and data. And the most latest, which we've been getting from the US and other locations. I mean, when you have to look at the article, it's just come back about asbestos being found in wind turbines. Now, this is all connected and but part of the wider picture here. What has been, have you had much impact, input from people in the last couple of days since that broke? And mainstream media haven't been that much over it. Like that would be one thing. We're talking about asbestos flying through the air into locations that are very close to people's homes. And if that was a concern at a mine site, the mine site would be closed down, because there are very, very different rules and regulations on that type of thing. And even your home, if you try and take out any asbestos, you can be fined. But what's happening here? Like, what are people saying about that?
That's a really interesting question, because that goes right back to the start where there's a breach of protocol. How is asbestos coming into Australia, considering it was banned in 2003? So where are the protocols around that? Who's managing that? Who's looking after that? How is it coming into the country?
Yeah, Bowen and Mr. Watt. What's with that? Yep.
Yeah. So, and then the actual concern around the asbestos in the wind towers. I am aware that the regulators are working on that at the moment. So that's, WorkSafe in Victoria, Safe Work in New South Wales, etc. So it will be interesting to see what facts actually come out from that, and then how that is managed going forward. And will there be proper protocols put in place? And will there be protocols on the wind farms when they're actually being constructed?
With this investigation that's going through, is there independent people that are involved in this that want to get eyes on, and not just from one side of like the government as well? Because what I've found is that the lack of transparency, even from results that are coming back, I've heard this from a number of people. I've had whistleblowers tell me that there's data sitting there that has been suppressed, and people have been threatened if they release it about impacts of things in our environment. Is there an unbiased view on this, and do you think that there's going to be transparency for the outcome, or are you concerned that there could be suppression of really what's happening, and that they're going to still keep trying to roll this out over your communities regardless?
That's a really good question again. One would hope that the regulators are an independent, impartial they sit there separate to the government to undertake these investigations. As to whether all of the information is going to become public, I can't comment on that. I would like to think that, it is. However, we've seen other instances where there is only certain information released and not all of the detail is released around it.
Absolutely. I mean, you only have to know that when you go to any of these meetings, like, it's supposed to be consultation with community, but it was box ticking events like you guys have experienced over there. And it was after the fact, even though there's been years and years of meetings and discussion with other parties, farmers and local community members were never consulted before the rollout of this. That's where this precautionary principle has been thrown out the window, and this is applied to everything that I have been reporting and interviewing so many people across the board, and it's the same story, Kate. It's so disheartening that communities and the lack of consultation, transparency, honesty and integrity, when we've asked for details, they can't be given. You know, you ask Mr. Bowen himself, how much does it cost to decommission a wind turbine? And they're saying, oh, not that much. And it's like, well, actually, we have construction people that have been involved, and they said it's about $500,000. And it's like, don't you think Mr. Bowen should know those details?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think
it should be disclosed.
Yeah. The other thing around that accountability and transparency piece too is that VicGrid has now become the planner, the developer, the regulator, and the enforcer. So where's the impartiality in that? You know, that's all of those things all rolled into one in VicGrid. There is nothing impartial, independent there.
This is where this whole draconian, and actually it reeks of communism, because what they're saying is that, just so people understand, in Western Australia, our grid is a public grid, so that means it still belongs to the people. We do not have privatisation at this point, and we are fighting like hell to keep that, because we do not want foreign corporations being able to flick switches and turn our energy supplies on and off. That is not going to give us energy security. Not just that, but also the capacity to put in other technology into devices or installations that may cause all kinds of issues of hazards, like we've just seen, you know, whereas the standards on safety when you're having asbestos being detected in blades. I have real concerns about how the transparency of this, seeing that it's the Victorian government alone that's the proponents and the ones looking into it. So at this point, considering they haven't ever really met with community to make sure that everyone was happy with this and answered all the questions before they rolled out this plan, I have real concerns for your communities, Kate, that again, it's going to come to the point where we're going to have to call on our city friends and family and other communities to come and support areas like yourself, and in Western Australia too, probably, where we're going to have to lock the gates, and they need to come and support you and other communities, because they're just counting on the fact that you don't have the numbers to push back, and they're very wrong.
Correct. And it's getting that message into the cities, getting that understanding and that education piece into the cities, so that people do understand that they need to support their farming community. They also, I think, need to be aware that potentially this bill is covering landholders. It's not just farmland or agricultural land, it is landholders. So where does this stop? This is just the tip of the iceberg. We don't know where this will eventually go. So it's not just about country and regional people, it is about city people as well.
And the kind of legislation that's drawn up is a bit ambiguous too, because it's giving access to land for priorities that the government deems are essential. And the thing is that what it seems to be, I mean, let's look at what happened over the last 4 or 5 years. That was deemed essential. People lost their businesses, their marriages, their lives. Families were torn apart. People were absolutely in such distress that they were doing, like, you know, calls all day long, every day, to keep their mental health together. And I can see that this is what they're trying to do, is isolate your communities, but we won't have it. So this is a call out all across Australia to go on and support your communities. Would you like to just give some of the Facebook pages or the community groups online a call out, and we can also list them in our segment, so that people can go on and see for themselves just what's happening? More of these interviews from farmers that have got the same story, where it's, you know, 125 years of farming that same land, where they're being stewards and feeding their community in all of Australia, and that's all at risk for foreign corporations to come on in and give us failing intermittent energy supply. Like, that's insane. Like, I just shake my head, truly.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
What groups?
There's so many groups. As I said, Across Victoria Alliance is sort of the umbrella group. The main area of impact at the moment is around the Wallaloo and Gree district area. So they've got a Facebook page as well. We've got a witchy proof and district no power lines page. We've also got a Koyuga and opposing wind turbines. There's so many pages that people can actually find and follow. However, I would ask that, if people can go to the Across Victoria Alliance page, they will get information. They will see these other groups from there. If they join Across Victoria Alliance, that's where we're a central point where a lot of information is shared, including things like rallies. So we might be doing a rally to Melbourne. So all the information's put onto there. And I think it's really important that we try and disseminate that as broadly as we possibly can, so that we are getting into the cities and we are starting to get that buy-in from our city cousins.
Absolutely, and that connection back to our city relatives and cousins is something that I'm wanting to extend more and more. A dear friend of mine, Farmer Kev over here in WA, said that we need to start an initiative where regional and country areas are going to invite schools and kids from the city areas to come in and see what farming is really about again. Come back and see regional and rural areas about the type of farming, and like this is what lambs are when they're born, and this is how they grow, and that does end up on your plate, and that's a decision you can make or not. But being informed and with consent is one thing, and this is where there has been no informed consent, and people are not consenting to having their land taken over, and neither should they. Not only just in farmers, but in other areas, especially in the city and regional. Look, Kate, I would love to support you more in any way we can. Please reach out to me and Edge Radio Australia by all means, where we can support any rallies that you have going, and get people connected to that main Facebook page. Thank you so much for joining me today, Kate.
Thank you so much for your time, Martine. That was wonderful.